So I want to welcome both mediators that are here from the, staff and presenters, and mediators that are on the Ag mediation program roster. And I know there's a number of other mediators that are joining also. We're putting this on in collaboration with the New Jersey Association of Professional Mediators. So I want to give a big thank you to them. And I think Barbara, the director, is here, and Marvin Schaldiner helped coordinate, organize. I'm the Ag Development Program Manager with State Ag Development Committee and coordinate the mediation program. And quick housekeeping, this is part one of a 4-hour continuing education training, 2 hours today and then 2 hours next week on Tuesday, the 23rd at the same time. We're organizing the 4-hour training. It's because that's one of the requirements for mediators on the Ag mediation program roster, just like the NJ Court roster has a training requirement like that. So we'll be able to give out credits to people that participate, attend, and I know the association has also submitted the course for continuing legal education credits. So since it's a training, we ask that everybody keep their cameras on during it and pay attention for the 2 codes that we'll mention during the course. So write them down. You'll want to have those written down so that you can enter them in the evaluation questionnaire that we have that will send a link to after the second part on the 23rd. So you'll answer a couple questions, including the codes, and then you can get the attendance certificate credit thing that way. If you have any questions along the way, type them in the chat. We can try to handle them at the end. Plus, we'll also hang out afterwards if there's any particular questions.
Dave, you're muted.
Thanks. Okay. So to get started, I want to welcome everybody. Both Ag mediators that are on the mediation program roster, and I know we also have other mediators joining us through the New Jersey Association of Professional Mediators. I coordinate the Ag mediation program with the State Ag Development Committee, and we're collaborating with the association to put this together. So big thank you to them. Quick housekeeping is that this is part one of a 4-hour training, continuing education training that we're doing for mediators, 2 hours today and 2 hours on next Tuesday, the 23rd. It's organized as part of a 4-hour training that we're doing because the Ag mediators have a requirement, just like the NJ Court, for 4 hours of continuing training annually. And the Association of Professional Mediators has also submitted the course for continuing legal education credits. So it's a training. Please keep your cameras on and pay attention for the 2 codes that we mentioned throughout. After the second part on the 23rd, we'll send out a link to an evaluation form where you'll enter the codes, enter some information, and then you can get the attendance credit certificate. Any questions along the way, type them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. And also presenters will hang out a little bit afterwards or towards the end. We can answer questions that way. Got a lot to cover. Some of this will be reminders and highlights for our program mediators, and for anybody that is not familiar with the program, it'll be a nice introduction or something that's new. If there's anything that if you have any questions, again, ask them, and it might spark interest in joining the program or getting involved with agriculture in another way. So touch on the mediation program, highlights and reminders with Right to Farm and Farmland Preservation that our Deputy Chief Legal Affairs, Allison Reynolds, will talk about. USDA common programs and issues and rules that they follow. We've got Lindsay Carriger from Farm Service Agency and Maria Colasso from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Mary Ann Tancredi from the Rural Development Office. And then farm transfer and succession is a type of case that it's very important to farm families over time. and we'll look at the issues and challenges and how mediation can help. Our next gen staff, Cass Pearsall and Jess Brandysky, will give a great overview of that and where things are headed. So just the context of things, the State Ag Development Committee, which is where I work and some of the other staff who are presenting, it's created about 40 years ago through those two acts, right, the Farm and Ag Retention and Development Act, Farmland Preservation. So preserving the land base and supporting viability of the ag industry are the central main goals and missions. And you couldn't do that if you also didn't have strong right to farm support and protection from people complaining or local regulations that were restricting you. From there, there's a lot of other programs also, but it's a state agency, State Ag Development Committee, SADC, and we partner with county ag development boards at the local level on all of this. So in right to farm cases, ag mediation cases, often you'll see CADBs involved. Just using a picture, some people might have seen this before, to say what the words on the screen might show. New Jersey's got a lot of development, so in some cases you have a few neighbors, a bunch of neighbors, or a lot of neighbors. The more neighbors you have, the more potential conflicts you might have, and that's why the Right to Farm Act is important, and also the mediation program, which was created kind of as one of the purposes originally and still used today, is it's an alternative to the formal process. Like, how can we help farmers and others resolve conflicts, disputes quickly, amicably, in a way that saves time and money? The formal process with the Right to Farm Act involves public hearings, attorneys, possibly appeals, time that you're not spending at the farm. History-wise, the program also started about 25 years ago and stems from further back in the 1980s, when the farm crisis led to a lot of debt and farms going out of business or foreclosure, agricultural credit issues, farmer suicide, and programs started to provide mediation, and then USDA provided a cost share grant to support those programs. So originally and for all time, the programs have supported any type of USDA program issue, trying to help resolve those, any ag credit issue, and on our end, we always supported right to farm issues. And more recently, any type of farmer neighbor dispute, whether it's one complaining about the other, can use the program for that. Lease issues, farm transfer and succession we'll talk about, and the Secretary of Ag can also add things that might be important. The most common types of cases we see are farmer neighbor and right to farm issues, and some USDA stuff. Again, kind of reminders for current program roster members, and then a new introduction for others. The way that case management works is the SADC staff, myself, will handle all the management of the cases, do the intake, reach out to their party to see if they're interested, and do all the scheduling, assign the mediators, rotate it around based on the region, and reserve a room or do it on Teams, supply all the forms and talk to the mediators in advance if there's any issues that we want to go over. Typically, we'll do that. The mediator responsibility is to do the session and use the skills that you have to try and get them to that agreement or narrow the issues and maintain the relationships, kind of get them moving forward. You write up the agreement, and then the office will circulate everything. This is also more introduction information for the other folks who maybe would be interested in joining the program, that we have training requirements, and the compensation is not, it's something, but it's not super lucrative. The joke that I think I said before is that it won't pay your mortgage, but maybe pay for a nice dinner or two. And there's also a compensation for mileage and meals. It's an independent contractor contract that we'll do every year with the mediators. And those are the quick highlights. And I want to next turn it over to Allison Reynolds, our Deputy Chief of Legal Affairs, who's going to share her screen to talk about the next two topics.
Yes. Hi, everybody. As Dave said, I'm Allison Reynolds. I'm the Deputy Chief of Legal Affairs here at the SADC. I'm trying to get here. I'll do a slideshow view. So I'm here to talk about the New Jersey Right to Farm Act. At this session last year, Brian Smith, the Chief of Legal Affairs, and I gave a much longer, more in-depth presentation about kind of the guts of the Right to Farm Act. We're just since you already got that training last year, we're just going to do a brief overview that kind of hits the highlights of the Right to Farm Act. So the Right to Farm Act provides two types of protections. One is the protection from restrictive local regulations. And what that means is if an agricultural operation has right to farm protection, they have the ability to preempt applicable municipal and county ordinances, which is quite a powerful thing to have. The other protection that the Right to Farm Act can provide is protection against neighbor and municipal nuisance actions. And what that means is if the operation has right to farm protection, it creates the irrebuttable presumption that what they are doing on that farm does not constitute a nuisance. So quickly going through the right to farm process, how does one get right to farm protection? One way to go about it is a complaint. So a neighbor who claims to be aggrieved by what a farmer is doing, or a municipality that claims that what is going on the farm is not in compliance with their local ordinances, may file a complaint against the farmer with the CADB. The farmer can also proactively seek right to farm protection rather than being on the defensive like they would in a complaint matter by filing what is called a site-specific agricultural management practice request, or an SSAMP. Again, they make the application to the CADB. And I should back up, explain what a CADB is. It's the County Agriculture Development Board. All of the counties in New Jersey, except for 3, Union, Hudson, and Essex, I believe. All the other counties in New Jersey have a county agriculture development board. The 3 I just mentioned do not, and in those cases, SADC would hear the right to farm matter. And again, if a farmer gets an SSAMP and gets their right to farm protection that way, it serves as a proactive shield to protect them from potential nuisance suits or issues with the municipality in the future. And we also see a combination of these two processes. Sometimes a complaint will get filed against the farmer, and then the farmer will seek the SSAMP as sort of their affirmative defense against that complaint. And I just want to pause right here and bring up a point, something we hear quite often, that there are folks out there that say, oh, I have right to farm protection just by the fact that I operate a farm. And the right to farm is not an automatic right. The farmer has to receive that protection from the CADB. And so just a reminder for the folks that are mediators in our agricultural mediation program, if you are in a mediation with a farmer and they're claiming, oh, I just automatically do not need to comply with the town ordinances because I have a farm and thereby the right to farm protection. Again, it's not an automatic protection. It only exists if it is given to them by the CADB. So I just went over the more formal Right to Farm Act process. The informal process is agricultural mediation, which I'll get into more in this next slide. Um, the agricultural mediation program is the informal way to resolve agricultural conflicts, and the SADC offers this service at no cost to those folks that are the parties participating in the mediation. Uh, this is mediation is definitely preferable to the formal right farm process. As Dave had said earlier, the right farm process, although ideally it's an easier process than going to Superior Court or going in front of your municipality, it still can be quite time consuming. It can still, the parties can still incur costs, whether it's legal representation, or the legal formal notices they need to provide to their neighbors before seeking an SSAMP request. Um, and it could get contentious and adversarial. So we we always, when we get inquiries about potential reg farm issues, we, as well as our CADBs, definitely encourage the use of this program because the mediators can help facilitate the parties in coming to an amicable agreement in a much quicker, I guess, less contentious way. So CADBs, something that's important to know under the Reg Farm Act, CADBs have primary jurisdiction over commercial farms. Uh, when we talk with municipal officials that are looking to issue notices against what a farm operator is doing, this is something we always have to remind them of, that it should really be the CADB that has the first pass at whatever issues are coming up on the farms. And, even if a municipal official thinks there's no way that that farm could be a commercial farm, I'm not going to get into, for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into the details of how one qualifies to be a commercial farm under the Reg Farm Act, but it is not the municipality's jurisdiction to make that decision. It is the CADB that needs to make the decision of whether the farm is even entitled to or qualifies for reg farm protection, and then, what that protection should look like. Um, so that is the Right Farm Act. That is one of the statutes that the SADC enforces. The second statute is our Farmland Preservation Law, which is the Agriculture Retention and Development Act. So, for the most part, when a farm is preserved under our program, uh, what we acquire is a development easement, which is the in the bundle of sticks on the property. What we acquire is the non-agricultural development rights. And then we place deed restrictions on the farm then to preserve the farm. So under the deed, it states that the premises shall be retained for agricultural use and production, and non-agricultural uses and development are explicitly prohibited under the deed. Um, there are also provisions in the deed that prohibit activities that are detrimental to the conservation of soil and water resources. There are restrictions with regard to dumping of waste materials and mining. Uh, Recreational activities are permitted on preserved farms, but only if they use the premises in its existing condition. So, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, that would be a permitted recreational activity, but building a ball field or an athletic field would not be permitted on a preserved farm because that would require an alteration of the premises for that recreational use. The deed explicitly lays out what the future residential opportunities will be on the farm, and they have to remain that way forever. And then oftentimes with preserve farms, you will see exception areas, which are just typically just 1 to 2 acre carve outs on the farm that provide these carved out areas where those portions of the property are not subject to the farmland preservation deed restrictions. So the purpose of them is to provide the landowner with some flexibility of use on their property. Um, our deed restrictions are perpetual. They run with the land. And we are statutorily prohibited from being able to reconvey those rights. I don't know if some of you have been involved with Green Acres preserved lands for open space. There is a diversion process with regard to open space where, if certain conditions and processes are met, the land could get unpreserved. That is not a possibility with farmland preservation. And so what is important as the mediators to keep in mind about this is it is if you are dealing with a farmer, it is very important to know whether that farm is a preserved farm and subject to these deed restrictions. Our deed restrictions are codified in New Jersey regulations, so they are state law, and there is no ability to waive their application. So it is important that in doing a mediation that involves a preserved farm, that you don't facilitate the parties into coming into an agreement that would allow them to do something that is not permitted under the restrictions of the deed of easement. Um, so SADC is always available to discuss the scope and parameters of our deed of easement with the mediator in advance of the mediation session. And yes, again, the agreements cannot create a violation of the deed of easement. And up on the screen, we have a provision in our regulations from the mediation chapter that all agreements requiring acceptance by a party not participating in the process shall be considered tentative, non-binding agreements until such acceptance has been obtained. So just keep that in mind as well. Um, and it's a very high chance that you will be dealing with preserve farm, as a third of all farms in New Jersey are preserved under our program. And
Right.
I all of a sudden have lost the ability to advance my slides. So, but I think I'm at the end of my presentation, right, Dave?
Yep, that's the end of it.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, more.
So this is just a screen with some information. We have on our website, we have our pages up there for the egg mediation program and Right Farm program. Contact information for each of the CADB administrators, and then also contact information for myself, Dave, and Brian Smith, the Chief of Legal Affairs. Please we're always here. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about Right to Farm or the Farmland Preservation Program, and how it may impact the mediation you are about to lead. So thank you for the ability to do this quick overview.
Thanks so much, Allison. Now let's turn to USDA programs and issues they see and the rules that they need to follow. We'll start with Lindsay from the Farm Service Agency.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides now. Please let me know if you cannot or if you cannot hear me. So as Dave mentioned, my name is Lindsay Carragher. I am the Deputy State Executive Director.
We can see your slides, Lindsay, but you moved over the Teams window on top of it.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, Lindsay Carragher, I'm the Deputy State Executive Director for the Farm Service Agency, and I am the Acting District Director, which then leads me to be the State Appeals Coordinator. And I've been the State Appeals Coordinator for Farm Service Agency in New Jersey since 2017. So today I'm going to provide you a little overview of the Farm Service Agency, speak specifically about my role as the State Appeals Coordinator. I'm also going to talk about some specific appeal policy and procedure policy related to Farm Service Agency programs, what appeal options are available, what is considered appealable versus not appealable, the goal of mediation and the role of mediators in our appeals, and recent FSA mediation examples. So what is the Farm Service Agency? The Farm Service Agency is a federal agency under the United States Department of Agriculture, and it acts as a financial and operational safety net for American farmers and ranchers by providing critical services, disaster relief, and financial backing through a nationwide network of state and county offices. The FSA stabilizes farm income and provides commodity, market, and price support programs to help American farms stay economically viable. And it's the mission of the Farm Service Agency to equitably serve all farmers, ranchers, and agricultural partners, and it's dedicated to achieving the economically and environmentally sound future for American agriculture through the efficient delivery of effective agricultural programs. FSA has 6 service centers located throughout the state, each responsible for serving producers in designated counties. There's also a New Jersey state office in Hamilton Square where I work out of, but we do not have a customer-facing presence, but rather our state office employees help the county office staff in delivering programs and meeting the mission of the agency. FSA provides direct and guaranteed farm ownership and operating loans to assist beginning, underserved, and established farmers who are unable to obtain commercial credit. Our farm ownership loans can be used to purchase or expand a farm or ranch, can be used to pay closing costs or construct and improve buildings. Our operating loans can be used to purchase feed, seed, fertilizer, equipment, can also cover family operating expenses and family living expenses while a farm gets up and running. We also have a microloan program, which we have operating and ownership loans both available under the microloan program. And these are designed to meet the needs of more niche operations where they're less traditional farming operations, not farming, specifically corn and soybeans, but might be operating more niche operations or smaller operations. And the microloan program has smaller paperwork, less requirements, which can really help a new business get started. The Farm Loan Team also provides emergency assistance through the Emergency Loan Program, and these loans help producers recover from production or physical losses following drought, flooding, or other natural disasters. FSA also administers supplemental assistance and emergency programs to help producers recover from natural disasters such as flood, drought, and fires. A few of our disaster programs are included on the screen. The Non-Insured NAP Disaster Assistance Program, which is our version of crop insurance, which provides compensation from production losses when producers are hit with a natural disaster. And those would be crops that aren't covered under traditional crop insurance. So mostly fruits and vegetables in the state of New Jersey are covered under NAP rather than traditional crop insurance. The Tree Assistance Program provides financial assistance to qualifying orchardists and nursery tree growers to replant or rehabilitate eligible trees, bushes, vines damaged by natural disasters. This program is getting a lot of eyes on it right now because of the freeze that we had in April in New Jersey, which was pretty devastating to a lot of tree crops and trees in general. Then we have the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish. We most frequently utilize this program through the honeybee aspect, where producers can be compensated for colony collapse disorder or through damage of the hives from possibly a natural disaster. We also administer ad hoc disaster assistance programs. Right now, we currently have sign up ongoing for the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, which is providing assistance to producers that have necessary for compensation due to losses in revenue from 2023 or 2024 disasters. And then we kind of round out our program areas through conservation and price support. The two that I put on the screen today to talk to you about is the Conservation Reserve Program, which pays yearly rental payments in exchange for farmers removing environmentally sensitive land from production. And then our most popular price support program is the Marketing Assistance Loan, which provides loans to producers and allows them to put their crop under storage and provide them with cash flow in order to meet their needs. And then they can sell the crop when market flexibility hopefully improves and the price increases. So that was a really quick overview of some of the programs that we provide to our producers. I can give you more information on those or fact sheets also at any time. The next thing I want to talk about is the rules and regulations that govern our programs. So we do that, and it starts with statutes. So statutes are also referred to codes, and these are the laws and written that are enacted by the legislative branch of the government. So they're passed by Congress and then signed into law by the president. And then we also have regulations. Regulations are often referred to as rules, as these regulations are written by the agency, such as USDA, FSA, and these are to supplement the laws that are passed by legislature. And then that's what happens, that becomes the Code of Federal Regulations. So the Code of Federal Regulations, or the CFR, is the codification of federal government's rules and regulations that are published in the Federal Register. So the Federal Register is the official publication of these rules, and it really governs how then we write our policy even further. So then we create our handbooks and our notices at the national level. So all three of these, the statutes, the regulations, and the handbooks, and also notices that are used to supplement our handbooks, are kind of the policy and the procedure that we rely upon to make our decisions. Integrity is essential to us meeting the FSA mission. FSA continues to improve regulations by fighting fraud, eliminating waste, ensuring the accuracy of producer eligibility, and minimizing improper payments. And we achieve our program activity when employees are properly trained about our programs, employees understand and maintain a moral commitment to implement programs as established by these regulations and policies, and that our established program policies are not compromised. And my role as the state appeals coordinator is to really work in all of these areas. So I'm responsible for ensuring that FSA's interests are properly and adequately represented by protecting the integrity of FSA's programs in all administrative appeals and mediation proceedings. I designate the FSA employee as the representative to represent the agency at an appeal, and also assist the employee that's assigned to the case in assembling and preparing the case file. FSA has 4 types of appeals. We have informal appeal options and then a formal appeal option. So you can think of these as rungs on a ladder, where you can go up the ladder, but you can't come back down, but you can start at any step. So reconsideration would be the first rung on the ladder, where the participant would seek reconsideration from the authority that issued the adverse decision. The next step would be to appeal to the FSA State Committee. The FSA State Committee is a group of individuals that are appointed by the Secretary of Agriculture during each political administration. And then obviously you know about the mediation rung on the ladder. And then the 4th rung on the ladder is appeal to the National Appeals Division. And this is a formal appeal option. So sometimes producers can jump right to the formal option, which is going to the National Appeals Division, and that's perfectly fine. But once you seek that rung on the ladder, you then can't back up and then go to reconsideration or go to the FSA State Committee or go to mediation. So sometimes producers will work the steps from start to finish. Other times they'll jump to a different rung on the ladder, whichever one they feel that they could be the most successful at. There's also times that producers may exercise every appeal option in effort to kind of delay any repayment that needs to occur because of the adverse decision, and that's totally their right to hit every rung or whichever rung they think they'll be the most successful at. So only adverse decisions are subject to appeal, mediation, or the other provisions that I mentioned. Examples of matters or issues that are not appealable and would be outside of the scope of appeals would be lack of funding, interest rates that are set nationally, or administrative matters, such as where FSA offices are located or where the service centers are located in the state. But participants can seek appealability, review, reconsideration, or mediation of any any program application, form, agreement, or contract. And the decision could be any of the following. It could be a denial of benefits or payment under an application or contract. It could be because of their non-compliance with program requirements. It could be errors in documentation and calculations necessary to determine the eligibility. Really, any matter related to correctly applying regulations that were pertinent to the issue of a fact, and whether the participant is acting in a farming-like manner can also be something that they appeal. For example, if they're claiming that their loss was because of disease, and we look at the common management practices that are published by Rutgers, and Rutgers indicates that the crop should be grown on raised beds and should be staked, and the producer is doing neither of those, that could be a decision where the county committee or the decision authority indicates that they're ineligible because they're not meeting good farming practices. And it was really management that led to the disaster or the loss of yield, not necessarily a natural disaster. We also have decisions that are not appealable, and those would be any general program provision or program policy or statutory regulatory requirement that's applicable to all producers. For example, did the producer file the application by the deadline? If there's no dispute over the date the producer filed the application, they really can't appeal that they applied after the deadline. They can, but they may not be successful in that appeal. Mathematical formulas established under statute or program regulation and decisions based solely on those formulas would not be appealable. However, someone can appeal whether or not we calculated that correctly, if that makes sense. So not necessarily the formula itself, but whether or not Farm Service Agency applied that formula correctly by either reducing the producer's payment or their payment not calculating. And then disapprovals or denials due to lack of funding. I mentioned that previously. Sometimes at the start of a new fiscal year, we may be waiting on Farm Bill. Funding could be delayed for those reasons. Now talking about what's most within your guys' wheelhouse is FSA mediation. So mediation is most likely to be the most productive when an adverse decision has already been issued, because that would present clear issues or challenges that can be resolved. In farm commodity, marketing assistance, or conservation programs, mediation doesn't really work in advance of an adverse decision, and it likely won't be productive. So that's usually where we find ourselves in mediation, is after an adverse decision has already been provided to a producer. So FSA must participate in the mediation in good faith. This obligation includes us furnishing information related to the appeal, related to the matter that is being mediated in advance of the mediation session, by us demonstrating consideration for and understanding understanding participants who choose mediation, and by setting a positive, constructive tone in the mediation sessions. That really assists in our ability to make sure that the mediation goes in a good way. We're participating in good faith. We're setting a good tone for the mediation. One of the goals for the informal appeals process, for which mediation is one of the options, is to maximize the opportunity for resolution of factual disputes between FSA and the participant at the lowest level within FSA. So the goal of mediation is to provide a means of parties to dispute and exchange information and explore options in a non-binding setting that will hopefully assist in a resolution of the dispute. And through the mediation, parties may be able to discover options for dispute resolution, or to avoid some or all of the costs that could come through with, administrative appeals or litigation. And even if the mediation does not resolve the dispute, the mediation process can contribute to improved program management and more positive relationships between the agency and participants. In particular, mediation can really improve communication, narrow the issues in a dispute, so that if an appeal is subsequently requested, issues in the dispute are more narrowly defined and more readily determined. So having mediation before a NAT appeal can really help both parties focus in on the problems that are before them and also see where maybe there's a disconnect in understanding and allow us to narrow the dispute area, which will then allow for a better or quicker resolution in NAT appeals, as that appeal can sometimes be quite lengthy. So during our mediations, it's imperative that the mediator maintain confidentiality and impartiality. A while back, I know I've told this story before, but I saw a mediator from quite some time ago at a county board meeting, and he was trying to place where he knew me from. And he was saying, "Oh, yes, I remember you. You're from where the guy had that issue with the water coming off the property with his neighbors." And I tried very quickly to stop the conversation quickly because I didn't want the mediator to share any information in a public setting regarding who the producer was or what the appeal was over, or share any sort of information that someone could deduce who the individual was. So confidentiality is obviously very important. The mediator should be expected to assist the parties to reach an agreement by providing a forum for the parties to exchange information, by establishing a structure for the mediation that will maximize the opportunity for reaching an agreement, for creating that positive atmosphere, and for helping the participant and FSA representative work together. The qualified mediator can be expected to manage the mediation in a way that does not result in any party abusing one another, and that really safeguards the process to ensure that no party in the mediation feels pressure in any way. And I mentioned the importance of establishing a structure for the mediation. And I think that really depends on the mediator, their knowledge of the policy that supported the decision, and how the appellate wants to proceed. I've seen mediations go in different ways where we maybe talk as a group regarding everything. I've seen other mediations where the mediator has spoken individually to both sides to try and identify where the impasse is. And I've really seen it work in many different ways very successfully. But I really think that how it works best is really dependent on the style of the mediator and how well they know the facts behind the decision. So to talk about some recent mediations that I've had, one was involving the Conservation Reserve Program, and it was a planting violation where we determined that the participant was out of compliance with the terms and conditions on part of the land. So this was an instance where the producer acted in good faith. They indicated that they would destroy the crop, but the violation was discovered after the producer harvested and sold the crop. So it was difficult for us to come to an area to really mediate because things had gotten so far out into non-compliance that there really wasn't a way for us to come back. Recently, we had one regarding the emergency relief program. There was a required review that the agency had to conduct after approval, and it was determined that the producer had an erroneous certification where they indicated that all of the acreage that they were applying for was covered by crop insurance or NAP. And that certification determined what the payment rate was. And when we conducted a review, we identified that the producer did not actually have insurance on all of their crops, which then required us to rerun the payment. And it was going to require them to repay the overpayment because they certified erroneously, and that impacted the payment that they received. Another one had to do in the farm loans program, where the applicant's farm operating plan indicated that they did not have a feasible plan. So FSA regulations define what a feasible plan is, and it requires that there is sufficient cash flow to meet all of the expenses, in addition to our loan payments and obligations of other creditors. So this was an instance where the producer submitted projected income and expenses, and FSA uses verifiable production and pricing to analyze and modify predicted plans as submitted as were required. So this was an instance that when we utilized the historic trends of the operation as a guide along with the tax returns, we found that it did not actually cash flow. So that was a situation where the loan was denied. And in that example, the producer could have had the ability to come and provide documentation that supported a feasible plan, maybe differences in what they plan to grow, or maybe they found a market they could sell it to at a higher rate and they have a contract now. So that could be information that's presented during the mediation that could possibly result in us altering our decision. In the other two instances that I talked about, CRP and the ERP case, these really weren't instances where FSA could modify the decision because there was just not any gray area. It was black and white, and we really were at an impasse where FSA could not modify the decision to benefit the producer at all. So when we're making our decisions, we are making every attempt possible to ensure that the decisions that we make are rooted in sound policy. So as a result, mediation sometimes does not result in us overturning the decision. But what it can do is it can result in us narrowing the issues and allowing the appellant to better understand the decision and the policy that supported the decision. So I don't necessarily define successful outcomes on whether or not FSA overturned their decision or modified their decision during the mediation, but rather were both parties able to come together, express their side, express their point of view, and leave respecting one another, even if we don't agree together on the decision that was made. And this really is only possible when the mediator plays an active role. So successful outcomes occur when the mediator understands the relevant facts, including the rules that led to the agency's making of the adverse decision. The agency will provide background information, will provide rules and regulations. The adverse decision letter is usually what triggers the mediation request. It's the first thing that Dave will always ask for if not provided by the producer. And we make sure our adverse decision letters clearly lay out the policy. And any of those policy references, we can surely provide you, the more specific handbook reference or CFR reference so that you can see where our decision was rooted in policy. And you reviewing that material in advance can be very helpful to having a productive meeting. Recognizing that the agency is not seeking to punish the producer is very advantageous. Our decisions are not targeted. We treat each individual applying equally, and we do so by applying the same policy to each individual. It's not necessarily our job to agree or disagree with the policy, but rather implement as it is intended. So understanding both sides of the producer's argument is very helpful, our side and the agency side, meaning both sides. One instance we had where the mediator met with the agency separately from the producer, and that was very helpful because it allowed the mediator to understand the position of the producer, but it also allowed us to speak very honestly about the agency's position and very confidentially in a trusting environment. I wouldn't necessarily say in front of a producer, there's nothing we can do here, but that was something that I mentioned to the mediator so that the mediator could really see that there wasn't much that we were going to be able to do to really change the outcome of the adverse decision. This was in the compliance case that I mentioned with the producer. There was no gray area. It was very black and white, and there was nothing that we could necessarily do to change that. So that was very helpful that the mediator understood that. Also empathizing with the producer, but also empathizing with the agency. In a recent mediation, we had the participant basically say to us, well, why didn't the FSA employee just look the other way? And sometimes we would love to do that. We don't always agree with the rules and regulations, but that's not our job. Our job is to implement them and follow them. So it was very helpful for FSA to be there and be able to explain to the producer that these are taxpayer dollars. This is not a situation where we could just look the other way. Our staff are regular people, and we don't want to say no to producers, and we don't want them to have to pay back money. But unfortunately, the job sometimes requires us to do that. So sometimes we don't like the job that we do, but we still have to do it. So when a mediator can empathize with the agency as well, that definitely helps there to be productive conversations and keep the relationship strong between the agency and the participant. And also identifying if there's an impasse that really cannot be mediated. The faster that the mediator realizes, like I said, that that decision is rooted in CFR or policy and it is black and white, and that there is no gray area where we can insert our opinion to possibly be more beneficial to the producer, that's super helpful, because I've had an ad appeal before that went on for 2 days and it was 16 hours. And that's because that's the way a NAD appeal works. Versus if it was a mediation, I feel like very quickly the mediator would have identified that there was going to be an impasse. And if we had mediated that, maybe we wouldn't have been, having this formal appeal over a 2-day span that was like 14 to 16 hours long. And unfortunately, it ended the way we expected it to, where the agency could not change their decision. So I know I went through that really fast. So if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Or if you think of something later, you can certainly email me at lindsay.carriger@usda.gov.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Let's move on to Maria from NRCS. And I'll, for both of these, try to do 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll remind you if you're getting close towards the end.
Thank you, Dave. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and my camera has been going on and off. So if you see me going off the screen, it's because the bandwidth is not really working in the state office today. But let me share my screen. And can you see my screen okay? Let me move this out of the way. Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Collazo, and I'm with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I would say most of what Lindsay covered on her presentation applies to NRCS as well. So I don't have any of that stuff on my presentation. But I would say I am the assistant for programs in New Jersey. So I manage all of the conservation programs that the NRCS manage in New Jersey, and my appeals person retired in March of this year, and I have been on the position for less than a year, so I am learning the process with appeals. And so today I thought I would talk to you guys about a little bit about our programs, what are the appeal rights that are associated to those programs, and some common cases that I was able to find. But I don't have the same experience as Lindsay that have actually worked on different cases. But I would say pretty much it's the same process. So it works the same as FSA, as NRCS is also a USDA program. So overall, our NRCS programs or our conservation programs, we work one-on-one with the producers to develop conservation plans, which outlines the conservation practices and activities. When I say conservation practices, they would be activities that help solve on-farm resources issues. So when producers have concern with erosion, concerns with water management, concerns with irrigation water management, this is where we have programs that can provide financial and technical assistance that can help solve those type of issues. And all of our programs offer different type of conservation assistance. And I'm going to go through all of that in a minute. So producers, implement these practices and activities as part of their plan, and which this can lead to better, air quality, water quality, healthier soils, better wildlife. So our programs has the focus on conservation on the farms. the first program I'd like to mention, it's our Agricultural Management Assistant Program. This is our smallest program within the state. And these particular programs help agriculture producers manage financial risks through diversification, marketing, and natural resources conservation practices. The main goal is to improve water quality, water management, so we can do irrigation type of projects. We can do practices that improve soil health, where we can also plant trees, and help with the production diversification, but at the same time resource conservation through erosion or integrated pest management, can also touch in transition to organic. So our producers can apply for financial assistance to treat some of these resources within their farm. This is a small program. It's only available in 16 states, and it is designed for states where the participation in the federal crop insurance is historically low. So this is just a list of the states where this program is available. But like I said, this is one of our smallest program in the state. Our largest program, it's our environmental quality and safety program that we do get about $9 million a year, where we can work with our producers to provide financial assistance. Again, it's to address natural resource concerns such as improving water and air quality, conserve ground and surface water, increase soil health, reduce soil erosion, create wildlife. So as you can see, all of our programs, or the ones I just mentioned, are towards addressing a resource concern within the farm, where we can provide that financial assistance and technical assistance, which include, technical assistance could include a design, an engineering design for a waste storage facility, or an engineering design for a grass waterway to resolve erosion problems on the farms, and so on. So the producer can implement these practices and get some incentive payments for adopting these practices to manage better their resources, the natural resources on the farm. We also have another program that it's called Conservation Stewardship Program. So this one, it's looking more as a whole operation. With EQIP, we might be looking at just one field where the producer can come and they want to fix something in one field. With the CSP, this is more a holistic type of program where we're looking at the entire operation and we're looking to see what the producer is already doing that is addressing existing resources and what else they wanted to do to expand on the benefits. Again, to address resource concern on the farm. And one example of these, like if the producer has been planting a cover crop, they may decide that they want to enhance that cover crop by changing the mix that they're doing. So instead of doing a single species cover crop like rye or wheat, they might want to do a multi-species cover crop that will have a higher impact in the soil, the cover, and then maybe the wildlife within their farm. So EQIP and CSP are very similar, but the way we like to describe it, it's the CSP, it's a rewarding type of program where we providing an incentive payment to producers for the work they're already doing, and we also can provide a payment for additional practices that they want to implement. Versus in EQIP, it's our fixed program where we're helping farmers to get to that next level where they are addressing the resources that are currently being impacted in their farm to get them to the CSP level. We also have an easement program. It's called the Agricultural Conservation Easement Programs, which has two components. One where we preserve land for agriculture uses, and one that help restore and enhance wetlands. So we do work with SADC to promote and implement our agricultural land easement, and Allison talked about all of that program. So our program works very similar, and we work in tandem with the state to preserve farmlands in New Jersey. And our wetland reserve program, this program, it's managed by the agency. So they are U.S. held easements, where we buy the development rights, the farming rights, everything. So all they can use that land for, it's for wetland restoration and enhancement. And then they're both permanently preserved. One additional program that I want to mention, it's we do have a program that's the Regional Conservationist Partnership Program. I know I'm saying a lot of acronyms, but the RCPP. And this is a partner-driven approach to conservation, where we work with entities and they can bring private dollars to match the federal dollars to amplify the benefits of putting conservation on the ground. And so entities have to apply through a funding opportunity every year to receive some of these fundings. So the RCPP projects may include a range of on-the-ground conservation activities, so it works similar to some of the programs I just mentioned, but they all get funneled through this one program. So we could do land management or improvement, which is the same that we would do under our environmental quality incentive program or our AMA program. We can do land rentals, which is similar to one of the programs FSA has with the CRP. And we can do entity held easement, which is similar to what SADC does with the farmland preservation. But we also have United States or US held easements, and we can also do watershed type of work through this partnership program.
We have like 4 or 5 minutes. Could we jump to make sure we get to the appeals and issues also? I just want to make sure we get to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just mention the program and I can jump into the appeal section. So I just want to mention these because we do get a lot of appeal through the highly erodible lands and wetland compliance because these programs or these requirements apply to many FSA programs and NRCS programs. So let me just jump because you'll have a copy of these. These are some of the reasons why you have to provide, the 1026, which is the form you fill out if you're going to do any of these activities within the farms. So if the farmers are doing any of these and they're receiving or applying for benefits through the USDA for many of the programs, then they need to be in compliance with this provision. And if we do make a determination related to these programs, which is a technical determination that they don't agree, they could request an appeal or mediation to solve that. Again, these are just all the programs that these provisions applies to. I'm just going to go quick. So when it comes to appeals, as Lindsay mentioned, this is going to be a little bit of repeat, but if an applicant disagrees with an NRCS technical determination or a program's determination, then they have a formal process, appeal process rights, where they can appeal to the decision that the agency has made that they don't agree. So there is the informal appeal procedure, so they can request reconsideration of an adverse preliminary technical determination within 30 days after we have made the determination, and this would allow NRCS to explain the best basis of the decision, schedule a field visit, and a consideration additional documentation about to the NRCS. So there's the informal process. There's also mediation where they can request that, where they can, try to resolve the dispute, especially with programs decisions rather than technical determinations. But a neutral mediator, as Lindsay also mentioned, works with them and us to mutually accept a resolution for the natural resources. And there's also the formal appeal to the National Appeals Division, which as Lindsay mentioned, again, this is the highest. And this is usually the last step in the process where they're trying to go through an appeal process. Let me go here. There's also the appeals. So on NRCS, we have the appeal to the Farm Service Agency County Committee. I know Lindsay mentioned at their level, they go at the state committee, but when they're working with our programs, the county committee, it's one of the options for them to appeal our decisions, and they can also do a judicial review. When it comes to our programs, so all the programs that I mentioned, the participants can appeal an NRCS decision when they believe we have an incorrect determination. And I'll give you a few examples on the next slide. But it is the same process as the HELC applies to all of our programs. So we have the informal review, request mediation, appeals to the Farm Service, national division, or judicial review. The only difference is that one of our programs, which was the first program that I mentioned, it doesn't fall under Title 12 of the Farm Bill. So they have all of the same options minus the FSA County Committee. So they cannot appeal to that group for that program. And then if somebody, receives a letter, they don't agree, they want to appeal and that want to request mediation, then when they're requesting mediation, that will pause the appeal deadline. They have 30 days to put an appeal request. But if they do want to do mediation, that puts a pause on the calendar. And if the mediation is unsuccessful, then participants will have the remainder of the 30 days to go through the rest of the process. So common appeals that we have seen in NRCS, it's the denial of program enrollments. We did get an application. We told them they were ineligible, they would get appeal rights, payment dispute, failure of NRCS official to issue required determinations, incorrect application of program policy. They may disagree the way we apply our programs policy, so they can put an appeal for that. If we terminate contract, because that's an adverse decision to them, they could also appeal for that. I think I have like 2 more slides left. So
Got
for
like 1 more minute.
Okay, yeah. So for highly erodible lands and wetland compliance, they can provide a written request for reconsideration or review of an adverse decision, and then we go into that process. And then another option is that they could do mediation. And then this is just an examples of different type of scenarios where the producer, requests, appeals for wetland determinations and highly erodible land designations, payments, procedural errors, and failure to act. And again, we are working under the same regulation. So that's all I have on my end, David.
Okay. Thanks so much, Maria.
Sure.
Appreciate it. And let's see if we can have Marianne from Rural Development give us a quick snapshot of USDA Rural Development programs. I know we're running a little late, so if possible, if we could do it in 10 minutes or so. Again, focus on the major programs that people use, and if there's any issues that you see come up more often than others, that'd be great.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Marianne Tancredi with Rural Development. I work out of our state office in Columbus, New Jersey. We do have an appeals coordinator. Our appeals coordinator is Melody Arnold. And a lot of you are probably not familiar with us at Rural Development. I don't think we've had much interaction in the way of mediation. So I'd like to first thank Lindsay and Maria for the overview of the Code of Federal Regulations, how the appeals work. It also applies to rural development. So I'm not going to cover any of that. I do want to give you an overview of the programs that we operate under and some examples of where we see appeals. So I'm going to share my screen if you will just confirm for me that you have the visual and my audio is coming through, and we'll
Yep,
get
we're good.
moving. Excellent. I am going to turn off my camera because bandwidth is an issue here in this office today. So here we go. So rural development is a mission area of the USDA. Our mission is to better the lives of rural communities in America and in our tribal communities. Community members for rural development could be any one of the items, people, places that are listed here. We have programs for individuals, small businesses, public bodies, municipalities, nonprofits, and agricultural producers. The type of assistance that we offer are loan guarantees, direct loans, and grants. And to give you a brief overview of what we've done in the last decade, here on this slide, you'll see investment dollars across the country in rural development, as well as here in the state of New Jersey. Again, we have single and multifamily housing programs, we have water and environmental programs, community facility programs, business and cooperative programs, and we also have telecommunications programs. All of this information can be found on a public-facing website. You see the link down at the bottom of the screen there if you're interested in pursuing any information as far as what rural development has done. This gives you an overview of what we've done just in the last full fiscal year in 2025. So you'll see we've invested over $58 million across 233 investments in New Jersey. And again, here is the information on this Rural Data Gateway where this information is found. You can use the QR code or the link there to access that information. So what is rural? Rural Development has a eligibility mapping tool where you can plug in an address and it will tell you for any of the programs that I mentioned whether or not that address is eligible for those programs. So I highly suggest you check our website and bookmark that eligibility mapping tool. So under the rural business and cooperative programs, we offer the business and industry loan guarantee under our 1RD guaranteed loan umbrella. Not going to read what's on the slide here. There's a link there to the website, but as you can see here, under $5 million, we can do up to an 85% guarantee. Anything over that is an $80 million guarantee. Annual guarantee fees and ongoing servicing fees are published annually in the Federal Register. This year, they are set at 3% and 55 basis points. For the business programs, the definition of rural is a population of less than 50,000. Our 1RD guarantee website has this wonderful lender's guide that covers all of the programs under the guarantee umbrella. And then this is just a couple of examples of common forms that everyone that participates in the program will be required to submit. I mentioned earlier the fees are published annually. This is this year's effective fees across the portfolio of guaranteed loans. And then to give you a couple of examples of guaranteed loans that we've done here in New Jersey. Oishi Mega Farm was a guaranteed loan that we did for energy efficiency equipment in their facility in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. They have a wonderful business there where they are doing strawberries using robotics, and everything is hydroponic. Plainview Growers in Alamucci was another guarantee that we did. It was a refinance of their debt. And then under the guaranteed, typically when we talk to folks, we get these frequently asked questions. These slides will be available to you. I'm not going to go through these questions here, but very useful information here. Again, additional questions, how we calculate the fees, what is required as far as reporting. We also have a rural business development grant. This grant is for these eligible applicants listed here and some of the uses that you see here. This is for nonprofits and public bodies for the most part. That's who we deal with. Some of these programs benefit entrepreneurial type centers, educational programs, can also be used for equipment. We see a lot of use of this program for equipment for like commercial kitchens and things like that. Examples of projects we've done the Hunterdon County Chamber of Commerce Center for Entrepreneurship. That was, you see all of the equipment there in that upper picture was financed through the Rural Business Development Grant. And then the Wildwood Business Improvement District, we've done a few grants under this program for them. And it was originally proposed to us as how to direct traffic off of the boardwalk in Wildwood to the main commercial corridor. And so you may have seen recently in the news, they're moving forward with that project. And it was due to the fact that these very small grants we provided enabled them to have a shovel-ready project for the award from the Department of Labor, I believe, to move forward with that project. We have a value-added producer grant. This program is the program in which I see most of my appeals. This is for agricultural producers. An agricultural producer is someone who derives more than 50% of their income from a farming operation. They can apply as any one of these type of entities. And a couple of examples here for you. We have Riverine Ranch. They have water buffalo. They make buffalo mozzarella, and they are also making some drinkable yogurts. Bottom left is the Gorgeous Goat Creamery. We have done several grants under the value-added producer for them for their goat milk soaps and lotions, as well as the cheese that you see there. Another example of the value-added producer grant, this is Cherry Grove Farms in Mercer County. They have accessed this program several times for their cheese production and also for their pork production. This grant has two pieces to it. There's a planning grant and a working capital piece. Most oftentimes, the appeals will come under this program when we talk about eligibility as far as whether they meet the definition of the agricultural producer. Oftentimes, it has come down to the scoring. The scoring for this program had been done on a multi-level phasing type of scoring, where at the end, the applicant got an average of 3 scores. That caused a lot of issues that resulted in a number of appeals over the years. And so recently, in the last couple of years, we have changed the way that the scoring is done for this program so that the applicant receives a single score and they don't get that combination or confluence of things that can be in disagreement. When you have 3 people scoring, you have 3 different opinions, and that just posed a lot of issues. So I don't think you're going to see much in the way of appeals going forward because of the fact that we've been able to mitigate that risk. But the value-added producer grant, I think, is one of the highest appeals that we see here at Rural Development.
Marianne, we have a couple minutes left. I was wondering if you could just summarize in a sentence or two the community stuff, and we'll send them the slides, but then get to the housing ones, which we have seen cases for.
Yes, yes, yep. So
Remediation.
community programs, we do community facilities and water and environmental. We work with these type of applicants under this program. We have a guaranteed loan. Again, the fees were published earlier. We have direct loans and direct grants for community facilities. And here are a couple of projects that we've done recently: DeBoer Heart and Lung, Borough of Clayton Fire Truck, and Mount Holly's police vehicle. We also have a WEP guaranteed loan for your water and environmental programs. We have direct loans and grants. And here are the fees and requirements for those. Housing. Let's talk about housing, because housing, single family housing, is where rural development sees the majority of our appeals. We have a single family home loan guarantee, 90% guarantee, and sometimes provides up to 100% financing. We have a single family housing direct loan, no down payment. These are all loans for individuals looking to purchase their homes. And then we also have home repair loan and grants. You see the information here about the limits and what the funds can be used for. We have a housing preservation grant. Not much to say about that. It's for low and extremely low income residents. We also have a multi-housing family division. We have a telecommunications program division. And that's pretty much it, Dave, for the presentation, the slides. We do have, you can sign up for a Gov Delivery to follow us on Twitter. And we have a summary of major programs that'll give you everything that I just talked about. Our offices are located in Mount Olive, Columbus, and Vineland. And this is the contact information for myself and the two other program directors here. Geraldine Manganero is the housing director. Some of you may be familiar with her. As I mentioned, our single family housing program is our highest number of adverse decisions and appeals that we see. Again, any questions that you have, we're happy to answer at any time, myself or any of the other program directors. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Mary Ann. And the interesting thing to note is that USDA clients could be farmers or homeowners, and they could request mediation for those programs. So let's turn it over to Cass and Jess to talk about farm transfer and succession and opportunities and issues and challenges.
Good morning, everyone. Are you able to see the slides? Everything up there?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'll try to speed through a few parts of this. So first of all, introductions. I am Cassandra Pearsall, Senior Coordinator of the SADC Next Generation Farmer Program. I was a Cooperative Extension Program Coordinator before coming over here to the state for this program, and I am also a Certified Farm Succession Coordinator through the International Farm Transition Network, which is something we're going to be talking about a little later on in the presentation.
And my name is Jessica Brandeisky. I'm a program coordinator for the Next Gen team. Before working for the state of New Jersey, I was working on farms for 8 years. So this program is near and dear to my heart. And then we wanted to ask that if folks have, done any work with farm families, specifically about farm transfer or succession, you can go ahead and add it to the chat. We'd love to hear more about it. Okay, so here's a quick overview of our presentation. We're going to briefly touch on our program and how it relates to what we're talking about today, which is, what farm transfer and succession is, why it's important, how it can quickly get complicated, and where mediation fits in. So the Next Generation Farmer Program was established in May of 2024 when Cass and I got hired with funding from the legislature and the governor's office. So the purpose of the program is to support farmers from all backgrounds as they get started, advance, and establish themselves in agriculture. So this includes supporting established farmers as they consider the next generation of their farm or farm business. So again, work began that day that we got hired on May 20th, 2024, and we spent the first 10 months of the program collecting feedback and input from the ag community, trying to make sure that we were very aware of what everyone was considering a challenge to be inclusive of everyone. And again, most important to today's conversation is that farm transfer and succession was highlighted as a major challenge for New Jersey farmers as we did that input collection. So here's some other programs that we offer and services we offer. If you want to read more about that, you can also visit our website, and we have a link to our report, which we're going to talk a little bit more about too.
Just 1 second, really quick. I forgot to mention the code for everybody to write down for their evaluation form. The first code is 5487. So 5487, write that down for your credits later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So why is transfer and succession such a major challenge for next generation farmers in New Jersey and established farmers? If you take a look at the numbers and statistics on this slide here, which were part of our report, it's pretty easy to understand why. With 750,000 acres in New Jersey and 250,000 of which are preserved, meaning, of course, they legally need to be available for agriculture. It's a real question of who's going to steward this acreage as farmers start to get older, which is on average age in New Jersey, 58.7, which is similar to the national average. And that represents about 2/3 of the farmers that are actively farming in New Jersey right now. So what's going to happen to those farms, especially if there's no plan in place? If a farmer has no children, or if they do have children who aren't interested in taking over the farm, what's going to happen to that farm business management? What's going to happen to those acreage, excuse me. Similarly, a lot of farmers or a lot of people who are getting involved in agriculture right now are coming from non-ag backgrounds. So if there's no pathway to getting onto that farmland, if there's no instruction for how to manage the farm that's been being stewarded by someone for decades, how are they going to know what to do when they come into that opportunity, and how are they going to continue it in a viable way?
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what farm transfer and succession is. So when we're talking about this, we are talking about the passing of a farm from one operator to the next. That can be inside or outside the family. Like Jess was talking about, if this is a new farmer that's coming in that is matching up with an established farmer that doesn't have an IR identified, that's still a farm transfer succession situation. The planning process of this is determining how that farm is going to pass from one generation to the next. This could sometimes be very simple or straightforward, or it can be incredibly complicated. For businesses, we're talking about the transfer of income, assets, management. We've got land and equipment. There can be multiple members of the family that need to be compensated or taken care of in this process. And it can take years even to just develop the plan itself. And some might say, is the plan ever really done? Because you will be, as your family, as conditions change, having to go back and update and keep an eye on that. So it's very good to get started early, because this can, and for many farms, should be a decades-long process where they know what they're doing, they know the direction, and they are regularly checking back in to make sure that their succession plan is in good shape and everything's going according to that plan. We also don't want to look in this process that farm succession is very dependent on viability, and sometimes the way the farm has been operating for the last 2 or 3 generations may not be viable anymore. Economic conditions can change, and it might be time for that farm to evolve to its next generation as well. So we're going to talk about some case studies later on today. One of those involves changing from one type of operation to the next, and that can be a big part of this planning process. So when we're talking about all the different aspects that go into what we call farm transfer and succession planning, it's a pretty big picture. I mentioned the assets, land building, other things, and how we're going to convey them while minimizing the tax burden for the family. Management transfer, is this going to happen all at once? Is this going to happen over time as the older generation steps back and the new one comes in and takes on more authority? estate planning and that end of life planning is hand in hand with the rest of this, making sure that as much of the estate value is preserved as it is passed on to the beneficiaries. Retirement and specifically long-term care planning can be a huge constraint here. If a farmer's been working for decades without taking an income from the farm, and suddenly their responsibilities are going to need to be taken on by other employees or paid third parties. How are we going to also support that farmer's living costs in retirement, keep the land viable, and what happens if there's a health issue that requires long-term care? Business planning, if the farm does have a business plan, it likely needs to be updated for that transfer process. And considerations of how the land is going to be used going forward, splitting between agriculture, forestry, and recreation. Different generations might have different ideas, and kind of for the mediator portion of this and the coordination, the farm succession coordination, the goal setting and family communication is really a top tier issue because a lot of these other transfer plans, retirement plans, and business plans can't happen and can't come together unless there's good family communication and clear goals of what that family wants to get to. And that's a space for third parties to come in and help to coordinate, facilitate those conversations, and mediate that process. So this is just a quick snapshot. There's a couple different ways to visualize the task areas that a family will be working through as they do succession planning. Again, that vision and goal statement is number one. If everyone's not on the same page of where the farm needs to end up, that's kind of needs to be the starting point of any conversation. It's going to require a lot of meetings. It might mean changing entities, updating operating agreements, doing business plans, analyzing the farm's cash flow and viability, and then we'll get into, legal arrangements, retirement planning, asset transfer, and getting more granular as we go down the list, and figuring out what that process is going to look like over the next months and years. Here are some of the different buckets of professionals that might be involved. Succession planning, as we've said, and we'll say again, is a very complex process. A lot of these legal and financial issues, as a coordinator or a mediator, you might not get into these parts, but you also might be able to offer some of these services. The managerial pieces where we get into that human side, those communications, that's a lot of times farm families may have experts and professionals that help them in these legal and financial buckets and don't realize they might need that same expertise level to help them through the goals, the values, the communications part of this as well.
All right, and here we have some farmer reflections on farm succession, which is interesting to see that appreciation side of this process. From this and in general, the real risk here for not planning for farm succession and transfer is the loss of the farm, which is something that we've heard has happened from some other organizations. One particular farm in Pennsylvania that the family didn't sit down, they never got to it, and then the state had to step in and take the farm because there was just no avenue for anything to be transferred. So that's really the worst case scenario here, something that we're working on with this farm transfer and succession planning process to avoid. By not planning, you can also miss out on an opportunity for someone who really wants that next step, who is ready to take on a farm and farm business, but they just don't have that one missing piece of the puzzle, which is that farmland. And one other thing I really appreciate about this particular reflection is that, someone from an underserved community could also have a nice pathway into agriculture by connecting with someone who needs an heir, needs a next generation, where otherwise it could be really difficult to get started in the industry. So farm transfer and succession challenges. Based on the few slides we just went through, I think it's easy to see where there's going to be a lot of different challenges in this process. There's a lot of big conversations that need to be had. Every farm operation is going to be a totally different story. There could be some really difficult personalities involved in the family. They might not want to agree on certain topics, as Cass was saying. So that's where mediation can really come into play. Finding professionals to work with is something that we heard a lot as we did our input gathering for the report. There might not be that next generation. And then, of course, the financial reality of transferring that farm. How is a senior generation going to afford to either stay on the land and not farm anymore, or how will they afford to leave the land and, again, make sure that they're being taken care of? Farming's not a hugely profitable business. So a lot of times people rely on the sale of farmland to be their retirement fund. So how can we figure out that part of the equation and make sure that everyone is secure, including the incoming generation? Can they afford it? Can they take on the business? Can they have a sustainable lifestyle by doing this? Okay. Again, as I mentioned, apologies, I've jumped ahead a little bit there. Our report identified that finding professionals is a major challenge for farmers, and cost, difficulty talking about personal issues, which leads to putting off the conversations, right? It's hard to talk about finances. In a lot of cases, it's talking about death and retirement. Farming is very labor intensive, so really busy schedules can make it hard to set aside that time to have these difficult conversations, or as some people might call it, the quote unquote boring stuff. It could be difficult for some people to talk to each other, so they may have to leave the bigger picture family dynamic to have separate conversations to understand their different points of view. And, farming isn't just a job. Many people consider it a calling or way of life. So it can be really hard for someone to consider what retirement looks like. They may just see themselves plowing fields right into the sunset. And, that next generation is like, hey, I really need to learn how this is going to work and what's going to happen. So a lot of difficulties there. Okay, next slide. And again, this is more information from Land for Good. They've been doing this work for 20 plus years, so they're really considered experts in the field. They've pointed out a lot of the same things that we found in developing our report and confirming what we're hearing in New Jersey, that these are a lot of the big challenges. Not wanting to have those conversations, what even is retirement for a farmer, and all the related complexities with legal, financial, social issues, and financial realities. Next slide. Again, exiting farmer concerns. How are they going to be financially secure? They're really invested in their farm business and want to see it continue. How are they going to offer this farming opportunity to that next generation and just kind of make sure that everything is as they want it to be? A big conversation that comes up in farm succession and transfer planning is the idea of fair versus equal, which I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with. This especially comes into play when families have children who have significantly participated in the farm operation, which can sometimes be known as sweat equity. So one child may have put in a lot of their time and effort and sometimes even finances into the farm business, where they may have a sibling who lives in a different state and really hasn't been involved at all. So what is fair in that situation? Does the parental figure want to split the farm up 50-50 and say, yeah, you've been working here for a while, but you know what? I really just want to make sure that both of you are secure with this farm. It really depends on the situation. Again, sometimes parents choose that. Sometimes they choose not to. They'll really work with the one child who's been doing more in the farm business. And we've read about both of those cases. So again, it's different for everyone, which is another challenge, that farm transfer and succession isn't just a step-by-step process that's easy to figure out overnight for every farm. Overall, success and viability of the farm is the major goal. So it's really up to the family to determine what that looks like. Also, if a farm is preserved in New Jersey, it may or may not be able to be subdivided. So that could be a part of the conversation as well. You can't subdivide a farm if it's not going to be parcels that are agriculturally viable on their own. So that could play a big role. Some farm families decide to split their farm up into smaller parcels, which may or may not be possible in all cases. So this is overall the two biggest challenges as per Land for Good, which is a little joking, but it's true. It's really just getting started and then finishing. But that's it in a nutshell. It can take a really long time. Plans can change over time, especially as life changes. Family members may even pass away during the planning process. A concern I heard from a farmer I've been talking to. A farm could acquire additional land, lease agreements may end, and operations may add new business ventures. So it's something that can be constantly revisited and changed over time. So it's just really getting everybody to the table and figuring out what that looks like.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the roles for mediators in this. So I was recently at the International Farm Transition Network's one of their annual conference, and they had several mediators there who were involved in agricultural mediation, and there was a lot of comparison of the role of mediator versus the role of farm succession coordinator. And over the next half of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and look at some areas where mediators might be helpful or where it's more of a farm succession coordinator piece. So, the important part here and what was emphasized at that conference is that mediators are great for when communication has broken down. They function as a neutral party, they're impartial, and they can really help to kind of facilitate parts of transfer and succession that are those real sticking points where family members are just not able to talk, not willing to talk, or they've reached that kind of impasse. So, that could be around just basic family dynamics and communication. We heard some case studies of mediators coming in for that, for situations where the family just they wouldn't talk to each other. Negotiating the transfer itself, dealing with that fair versus equal question, those kinds of disagreements. If there are service agreements with other professionals, if there are elements of loans or things like that, like we talked about in some of the past presentations today, some of those issues might require mediation if there's like a loan that's in default or some other program that didn't come through. An issue with a lease that's important to the succession and the viability of the farm, and all of these different parts of implementing that succession plan where there's that breakdown, mediators can play an important part. And we're going to look at a couple case studies, and there's some worst case scenarios. And when the emotions are very high, decisions are needing to be made, or families feel like decisions need to be made very quickly, and there's strong disagreements, can often be the time to stop, sit down with a mediator, and really work through those problems. So first, we're going to talk about the Muth Farm. So this was an issue. Both of these next two examples of case studies are New Jersey farms. They ran into different types of transfer and succession problems. In the case of the Muth farm, you had the classic situation of older generation who just kept putting off planning. It was brought up, they had one son that was on the farm that was very dedicated, but the question of succession, it would get talked about, but it was always put off as a that's later issue. And that kept getting put off and put off and put off until the older generation, the father of the family, suffered a sudden stroke. And so this suddenly threw the entire farm into question, the future of the farm, what was going to happen. And the family felt like they were being forced to make these decisions in a very short timeline, and that they might have to sell the farm in a very short timeline. And those are the worst circumstances to have to make those sorts of decisions in. Oh, okay. So, the first and kind of most obvious direction that the parents wanted to go was to subdivide the farm, like Jess was talking about. This was not a preserved farm. It was 45 acres, and they were looking at subdividing it equally amongst the kids. That would result in the one that was actually farming having a parcel that was not large enough to be viable to keep doing the operation. And since this was not a preserved farm, there was heavy development pressure. And so there was a lot of risk of the farm being sold here. In order to delay this decision and delay the subdivision, the parents eventually agreed to put the land into a trust and slowly transfer ownership over time through the form of gifting. But there was one of the folks in the family that really disagreed with this decision, and pursued legal action, which kind of ground the process to a halt. So ultimately, this led to a lot of family conflict. The trust did eventually get created, and but during that point, there was more sudden deaths. The father had a second stroke, and there was a lot of tension and conflict within the family that could have been avoided if this process had been planned earlier, if that succession planning hadn't been put off, if they were working with someone who could guide them through those steps instead of waiting until there was a crisis. Because when we're making decisions in a crisis, we're not thinking clearly, and that's where businesses and farms get lost. Ultimately, the farm was able to be taken over by Bob, the son that was farming there. An agreement was figured out, and Bob went forward to pursue preserving that parcel. But at the time, this could have saved 2 or more years of conflict and legal fees and costs to get to that point. Our second case study involves a farm that, as we mentioned, sometimes this means the evolving from one type of enterprise to the next. So in this case, we had a dairy farm. So Lewis Donaldson had a dairy farm operation. The economics of that started to decline in the 80s, and his sons wanted to take it in different directions. So they each sort of had their own interest areas, and you had one son that went into wholesale fruit and veg, one that went into retail fruit and veg, and the one that went into a nursery operation. So now you had 3 different enterprises that were all part of this same farm business that was slowly diversifying from dairy into these other operations, and conflicts started to arise. You had limited resources, you had limited land, limited facilities, labor being shared, and suddenly you had family disagreements happening. This wasn't being done with a clear plan or outline. And so, because you had these 3 separate enterprises, conflict between the other brothers increased and got to the point where one of them was ready to leave the farm entirely, pack up, and take their operation elsewhere. They were able to sit down and actually work on this together, get professional help, and through this process, created 3 separate business entities still sharing the land, but each brother could focus on their own business. And this got rid of a lot of the concerns about what was fair. Was this one brother getting more than the other? Because they were each given their own part, their own operation that they liked, that they were interested in, and they were really on their own to manage that piece. And so they still cooperated. They were still able to share, but it was more of an agreement, business to business, working with each other. And because of that, they were able to transfer the management of each piece gradually from Lewis to the sons. And eventually, ownership was also set up as a gradual transfer process as well. The land was put into a revocable trust, and assets were gifted over time to minimize inheritance taxes. So these are great examples of solutions that are out there that can help to eliminate family conflict, that can make this transfer over time possible. But these sorts of things don't happen in a crisis. Everything in here took long-term planning, took agreements, took communications, in a lot of cases took compromises from some of the brothers in order to make the farm viable. And they all had that family goal of keeping the farm viable, keeping it going. And that was what allowed them to do this process over the course of years to keep the farm intact.
We have about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, here's some resources for farm transfer and succession. We use this a lot when we're getting contacted by farmers looking for support. Under that first bullet, those 3 web pages, the SADC site, AFT site, and Land for Good site, contain references to many other organizations across the country that do this kind of work and have different resources available, including some interactive tools for planning purposes, which can be really cool to look through, and again, refer farmers to that. They find it helpful. American Farmland Trust, or AFT, as it's listed on the slide, also hosts a land transfer navigator program, which Dave and Cass and I are all a part of. And through that, we can refer farmers to a $10,000 grant that can help address barriers in the transfer and succession process, and whether that's planning or it's happening. So it can cover some business professional services or some equipment and infrastructure that helps that farm get to that next checkpoint of being transferred. So we also help administer New Jersey LandLink and FarmLink, which is a way that folks can possibly find successors for their properties. So it really focuses on land access. And then we also refer folks to ourselves under that second bullet for ag organizations. Cass is a certified farm succession coordinator. So we're starting to work one-on-one with families in helping with their planning process. Farm Credit East offers a lot of farm loans and other business services for families to look into the viability of their current ag operation and maybe consider ideas for ways to expand that. And New Jersey Farm Bureau, we've heard, can also sometimes refer farmers to professionals who can help with different financial, legal services. Not sure if farmers have to be a member to get that information, but we've definitely referred farmers their way. And then at the bottom there, Farmland Preservation Program, that can help for unpreserved properties. It can help protect the farm's legacy, obviously by protecting it through an easement. And then preservation funds could be utilized for a farmer's retirement, or it could help make the land more affordable to that next generation by removing that development potential. Okay, and then we just have a couple slides here with screenshots of some of the resources that were just mentioned. This is AFT's Farmland Information Center and their Farm Transfer Toolkit. So it's nice and interactive. Farmers can get kind of like little chunks of information depending on what they're looking for by clicking on the menu. Of course, next page. And then this is a planning workbook from Land for Good, which could be helpful for farmers to look at just to kind of get a start and start to see, oh, wow, this is going to take a long time. I do need to sit down and talk to, Aunt so-and-so or my cousin about what they really want to do with this farm and bring it to their attention that we should probably start talking about this. Next slide. All right, and so we've mentioned it a couple times through our presentation, so I wanted to make sure we got to it. The International Farm Transition Network has a Certified Farm Succession Coordinator training program. So if you have totally loved our presentation and now you're really interested in working with farm families on their transfer and succession planning, you could be interested in this program. There's only one person in New Jersey certified to do this, who is Cass. So there is a gap in this kind of work. Becoming a certified farm succession coordinator means that we could also refer farmers to work with you. So this slide just has some basic information about the program. It's a 20-hour online training program. I think some years it is offered in person, if that's your preference. There's continuing education requirements for every 3 years. Program costs $950, and it's a great way to learn practical skills and knowledge for working with those farm families. And in the next slides, Cass is going to go into some more detail about it.
Yeah, so I'll go through some of these pretty quick, but we have a little time here. So this is a Certified Farm Succession Coordinator program. It was originally developed by University of Madison, Wisconsin Extension. And you will notice there are a lot of overlap with mediation skills through this. So farm succession coordination, we've talked about each situation's unique. Some of these can be one-off meetings. Some can be a long-term process where you're meeting with a family multiple times over the course of months or even years. Through this training, we work with a variety of worksheets. I'll show you the workbook in a couple slides here, but we have these tools to help us guide farmers through the process, collect information, analyze their situation, and get them thinking and having these conversations. This is really about the human side of things, and our goal through this program is to help identify succession risks and needs and develop very specific point-by-point action plans to help the family address those and move those topics forward. This is taking succession from being just a big, scary kind of amorphous idea and really bringing it down to earth, identifying the steps, and helping keep the family accountable as they go step by step through the process. So what does this look like? Said can vary from farm to farm. Some may just need some resources or support. They already have a plan and they're just looking to take it to the next step. Others might need that more comprehensive coordinator service. So we'll get farms referred to us by service providers, by other farms. They might connect with us at conferences, and we will have an initial intake call where we get very basic information about the farm, who's in the family, what's the situation, where are they at, what kind of business do they have, just enough to give us an idea so we can prepare our thoughts. We'll send out some information worksheets to the farm to collect some of this information, get a better picture of the business that we're going to be working with, and we'll do some research on our end to learn more about them. Those initial meetings with these families can be 2 to 3 hours. This is really a sit down, take us through your business, and like let's figure out where you're at, where we're trying to go. And then, depending on the farm's needs and situations, we may set up follow ups, like I said, over the course of months or years. These are the big picture questions, and this is really for me kind of what made this work in my mind in terms of a process. So, really, what we are helping the family do is analyze where is the farm now, where do we want it to be, and how do we get there. Our first meeting with that family is really about these first two questions. We want to know where the farm is now, what's the size, what are they producing, who owns which assets, how much land is there. And through that, we're already starting to identify some risks. Maybe there's an important parcel of land that's leased, but it's a handshake agreement, and it could really affect the viability of the farm if that land was lost. So maybe that's something we could talk about. Maybe they don't have wills, no one has a retirement plan. So those are all elements we could start to plan around. Where do you want the farm to be? In a lot of cases, they might, like I said, have that identified successor. They know we want this sibling to own the farm and keep running it. We want to keep the farm intact. And this is where you might start to get an idea of where some of the conflicts are, where some of the points that might need coordination, conversation, potentially mediation. And then that third part is how do we get there? So usually that would be second meeting on. That's where we're really taking those risk points and conflict points from the first two questions and boiling that down into action plans. Okay, we need to update our wills. Who's going to do that? Who's making that phone call? Where are you getting quotes from? What dates are you doing that by? And then we can help them to identify resources, grants, things to help them along the way in that process as they get that work done. One of the big questions that we kind of keep in our back pocket that can really help to break through some barriers and some hard conversations is this big bold one on the bottom of what do you not want to happen to the farm? Because a lot of times there might be disagreement about the little details of who owns what percentage of what and who controls which asset. But if those are sticking points and the family's not able to get past them, we can play that out. Okay, if we don't solve this, what does it look in 3, 5, 10 years? And what do you not want to happen? If we don't solve this, what outcome? And if that's the loss of the farm, the sale of the business, a lot of times making that real to the family can be the motivation that helps them move through the rest of this process. This is the workbook that I mentioned earlier. And like I said, this is a tool you can give to farm families. We will select certain pages out of this to hand out depending on the individual's family's needs and where they are in the situation. We are hopefully working on developing one of these that will be branded and for New Jersey. So that's in process. But this is going to help the farm owners and successors stay on track and complete their work. And like I said, this can vary from farm to farm, but it's a good way to visualize and really help the farmers and their family members sit down and really think through their situations, their vision for the future, what their risks are, and take all those things and start to move them in a strategic planning direction.
What
Some
about
of
5
these-
minutes?
Okay,
Sorry.
some of these concepts are going to be very familiar to you. If you're mediators, a lot of the ethics are very similar around conflict of interest, professional limitations. If you're not a lawyer, you can't provide legal advice. If you're not an accountant, you can't provide financial advice. It's a confidential and self-governing process. Everyone's there voluntarily. And as a coordinator, we are staying objective, we're staying neutral. Even if we have an idea of what should happen, the family has to come to a decision that works for them, that they believe in and have buy-in for if it's going to be sustainable. I know there was some talk earlier about how to kind of structure agreements, make sure that conversations are being fair and, no one is bullying anyone else, that everyone's listening and being honest. So all of these are kind of mediation principles, probably familiar to you from that work. As far as when is the farm succession transfer planning process done, it is really when the parties decide it is. It's voluntary on their part. They may decide after a couple meetings, they have a plan, they're ready to move forward. They know what they need as they reach out to other professionals. They don't need us anymore. Or they might want us to keep checking in. I've got one family who's just like, hey, please just remind me every month or two. I'm really bad at remembering these things, but if you nudge me on them, that'll help keep me honest and keep me going. So the plans might need to be revisited. And, if we as coordinators check back in every 6 or 12 months, how's things going? Any changes we need to account for? That can be part of it as well. But it's done really when the farm has transferred. And by the time the farm is transferred, it might be ready to start doing the plan for the next generation as well. So as you've probably seen through this, I'll fire through this real quick, but mediators could be ideal succession coordinators. You have a lot of the skills already as agricultural mediators. There's a lot of this overlap of business and family dynamics that is very, very unique to agriculture that mediators, coordinators can be well suited to deal with. Navigating these challenging conversations, navigating this equal and fair between siblings, and really, which is always a tough point, and I know Jess mentioned this, that retirement planning piece when you have a farmer who just thinks they're going to just do this until they can't. They're going to keep farming until they fall asleep one day and then they don't wake up, and that's the plan. And being that third party, that voice that can be like, okay, but what if? I know you want to do that, and I support you doing that, but let's have a backup plan in case the worst happens. If you are interested in working with us or being a part of the ecosystem of professionals that we are trying to build to support farm succession in New Jersey Ag, please reach out to us. If you're willing to get certified as a farm succession coordinator, we'd love to talk to you about that. As just mentioned, I'm currently the only one certified. Jess will be completing hers this fall. But please reach out if you would like to join that training cohort. We can provide you with information and help you get started there. There's a real need for this service, and we would love to have you on our list so that we can refer folks to you and explore, future opportunities to build out a program in this area where we might be able to leverage some funding to help pay for these sorts of mediator type coordination situations.
All right, so the big takeaways from today's presentation, and thank you all very much for listening. This work is really important. Transfer and succession planning is complex, takes a long time, and may never be what we all really consider as completed, right? If things are constantly changing. However, having no plan at all is certainly the worst case scenario, and mediators can help farm families with their planning process in many ways to help ensure that farmland in New Jersey is not lost and we remain the Garden State. Next slide. So thanks everyone again. Feel free to contact Cass or me if you'd like to discuss anything that we've talked about today in more detail. We ran through things kind of quick, so appreciate you all hanging in there. And if you really want to learn more about the IFTN program to become a certified farm succession coordinator, reach out to Cass and she'll be happy to share more.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks so much, Cass and Jess and all the other presenters. The second code for you guys to write down is 3795. So that's 3795. And again, thank you, everybody. Great presentations. Farm transfer and succession is a big issue. We can use more help with that. If you're interested, reach out. And hopefully we'll see you all again in a week's time, 10 a.m. on June 23rd for part 2. Marvin Childiner will be doing a skills-related training on ethics and managing that in mediation, plus logical fallacies and how to understand and address those. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.